I'm Scott Jorgens, your host today, and on the line with me is Marvin Burnett, and we are from Endeavour Solutions / GP Support North. Our agenda is really, how do we modernize and transform our business with existing functions in GP? And to do that, recommend the most latest and greatest of GP, which is 18.4, which was released in October of 2021. So just it's currently January, so just a few months ago. Before I do transition it over to Marvin, I wanted to talk about GP infrastructure. It's something that always comes up at time of upgrades. A lot of options for GP infrastructure and hosting your Dynamics GP. Obviously, your data center, and that could be, we typically consider that on-premise. Sometimes your data center is actually at a third party and third-party data centers, and obviously remote access to those through the Windows remote desktop services. A number of clients are looking to do cloud backups. So your Dynamics GP is on-premise, but you're backing up to a cloud. That could be Azure or it could be other cloud providers. Then there is an option to host your Dynamics GP on a private cloud, which is essentially a third-party data center, but they call it a cloud. It has some additional services that are bundled into it and making sure that everything works out just fine. And again, access to through remote desktop. And then there are options to host Dynamics GP on Microsoft Azure. And again, that's really just a third-party data center. It just happens to be Azure, and it's up in the cloud and using a similar architecture. The private cloud has shown to be the most cost-effective and top level of securities. We had a webinar a little while back comparing some of the costs across each of these functions, on-premise, third-party, private cloud, and Microsoft Azure. You can find that at www.gpsupportnorth.com/gp-cloud hosting. And obviously there's search on that website as well to be able to find it easily. While I have everyone's attention, TLS 1.2 security. This is a growing concern and something that has been flagged. TLS 1.0 is the standard security that all versions of GP have been supporting. GP 20, we'll call it the version that was released in the fall of 2020, being 18.3 and later, support the new version of TLS called 1.2. These security standards have been evolving over the years. Microsoft actually announced before the COVID pandemic that they were going to turn it all off. They've done extensions, and it's TBD when they're actually going to turn it off. This is a Office 365, Microsoft 365 decision. Has nothing to do with GP. However, with their decision to turn off the TLS 1.0, it will stop your ability to connect Microsoft 365 and Office 365 to Dynamics GP if you're on a version of 18.2 or older. We do have a workaround, and there are some options. You can reach out to Endeavour Support Desk. The easiest option is upgrade to 18.3 or 18.4, being the latest versions of Dynamics GP, and they support the two-factor authentication and this newer TLS 1.2 security. So with that in mind, I'm going to transition it over to Marvin. I'll let you redo your own introduction and take over control from here. Just for screen size, as we're moving towards showing GP and your various components, we can take off our cameras, and that'll improve the real estate for our viewing audience.
Alrighty, thanks, Scott. I'm Marvin Burnett. A number of you that are on the call have probably chatted with me in the past or had an opportunity to do some work with me. Just a little bit about myself for any of you that don't know me or haven't had a chance to meet me. I've been working with Dynamics GP. Maybe I shouldn't have turned on my camera to start with, Scott, so people wouldn't know how old I actually am, but I started working with GP back in around the mid-90s. I think it was 96. Started on the DOS version. Have seen a lot of things change and a lot of things happen in the Microsoft, I'll say in the general Microsoft world, but Microsoft GP grow over those years. Seen it change names, change versions. It went from GP, and they had the modern lifecycle name, and they went to versions tied to the years. Now they've moved back. So it just seems to be one of those things that Microsoft does, is just change the name often. But what I'm going to be doing today is going through a lot of the enhancements that have come out. Now, in the process of going through the enhancements, I'm going to be talking about what's new in the latest version. There are certain things, like I'll try to stay within the application itself, so I'll try and focus on the what's new in the financials, the distribution. Oh, hang on, let me just get to the screen. So financial distribution, some of the enhancements in the HR, some of the system enhancements, some of the workflow enhancements. Scott had mentioned a number of the enhancements that have happened in the background, so that TLS 1.0 to 1.2, multi-factor authentication, updates in the tables, updates in the support versions of SQL and stuff like that. I'm not going to cover too much on that today, just because, you know, given the crowd that we have, I don't think everybody wants me jumping into SQL and, you know, tying up time talking about that rather than working on the what's new. A few of the other things that I'm going to do is, as I'm going into some of the what's new functionality, if there's other things that I really like, you know, Scott can probably attest to this. If you give me a little soapbox to stand on, I will go through things that I like as well. So if there are things that I've seen over the years that are really great that have tied into some of the new enhancements, I'm going to touch on those as well. I'm going to then move into some of the stuff that I really like, so some of my favorite features that I've seen over the years, and then maybe hit some of the ISVs if there's time that I really like and I've worked with over the years. So these are the companies that add enhancement to Dynamics GP as well. And then if all goes well, hopefully there's a little bit of time at the end for some questions and answers. So maybe without any further ado, I'm just going to minimize this screen. Now I have GP open down in my application here. So you can see I've just going to move over to the home page. So in terms of some of the stuff that's new, one of the things, actually before I even jump into this, one of the things I really want to touch on. So GP, as I've mentioned in the past, is a mature product. What does that mean? Well, it means Microsoft doesn't spend time developing a PO system. It doesn't spend time developing a sales order system. It spends the time enhancing that functionality. Now, how do they decide what to enhance? Well, there's certain things, so system table, you know, infrastructure in the background that needs to be kept up to date so that it works with the most recent Microsoft operating systems. But in terms of functionality, and a lot of the things that we're going to be going through today have been actually votes that people have made. So they've gone on to Microsoft's website. So I'm just going to pop open a web browser here. And I'm just going to go to the Microsoft, like the Dynamics GP vote. So what this is your ability to actually have feedback and say, these are the things that I would like to see improved in GP. So along these lines, you can actually search for some of the different pieces that people have put in votes for. You'll see Terry Healy, she's one of the people over at Microsoft, has submitted a number of ideas and they've actually implemented a number. You can go through the different functional areas, or you can even suggest your own new idea. So I always recommend people to go onto this page and either take a look through and vote on them. I've done it myself. Or make some suggestions and say these would be great improvements and make them as suggestions and get them voted on. In fact, I remember a few years back, one of the people I was working with, they actually put one of the suggestions in place. It got implemented. I think it had to do with payroll, and it was pretty awesome. We were pretty excited, which, you know, I think is pretty cool, but others may think it's kind of geeky, but that's okay. So let me jump into GP. So in regards to one of the features, so let's talk about some of the financial features. So financial is dealing with GL, chart of accounts, and the information that surrounds that. So I'm just going to click on my financial tab here. So from my financial tab, I'm just going to minimize this. One of the first features is the updating of the account descriptions in the mass modify function. So for any of you that haven't used the mass modify function in the past, this is where you have the ability to say, you know what, I have a chart of accounts in place. I need to copy. So let's say you had departments. So departments, maybe they're identified in segment 1 or segment 3. My chart of accounts has a 3-segment chart of accounts. Inside GP, you can have up to 10 segments by 66 digits. So in my scenario, I've got a 3-segment chart of accounts. One of them's department, one of them's a sub-account, my main account here. If you added a new department, or if you're tracking divisions, or cost centers, or whatever it is that you're tracking, you can easily use this copy function, or move, or inactivate, or delete to add another segment to your chart of accounts. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is I have some names, I have some account numbers. I'm going to just jump over to my account setup here, and you can see petty cash. So petty cash is 101000. Let's say I were to add another GL account for petty cash. So I'm just going to hit clear here and go 100 101000. Well, as I press tab, you'll notice automatically it brought in my description. So my department is the business department, or my business unit is my business department. Petty cash is 1010, admin and IT is anything 00. Why did GP add that description? Well, this isn't the new feature, but if I just take a quick peek over into my setup and my segment, what you'll see here is I have my 3 different segments. I have departments and divisions. If I look at, for example, my departments, which is segment 3, and service, admin and IT, so that's why it actually updated. Now, if I were to add another segment, so if I added another department, easily enough I could say -99 or something along those lines. Now, I want this to roll down because I've used the mass modify function to copy all the chart of accounts, but now I want to mass modify and update them with all the proper names. So easily enough, from here, I can go into that mass modify. I can pick the update account description. I'm going to narrow down the scope of what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to pick up that 1 petty cash just for ease of demonstration purposes. So I picked up that 1. I'm just going to say show my selected range. I'm on the update account description, and simply enough, I just hit modify here. It's going to give me a little warning. Are you sure you want to do this? Because one of the things that you'll notice here, there's no undo button. But easily enough, I'm just going to say okay here. And what that's done is said anything 000 was North American, 1010's petty cash, admin and IT. So if I go back down to my chart of accounts, and if I do a lookup here, you will see that has updated my description. So that's one of the functions, or one of the features that they've added, is that update chart of accounts, or update the account description. And that's tying in that segments and tying in that chart of accounts and mass modify function. So pretty great feature, especially for companies that are doing, if you're doing acquisitions and you're bringing in new companies or new business units into the fold, and you want to add segments into the chart of accounts, this is great. Now, the next function that was introduced, it's actually, I'm going to touch on a couple different parts here. This is the summary post accounts receivable for your cash receipts. So let me just close out of here for a second. And I'm just going to move over to my sales tab now. So from my sales tab, I'm going to go into my transactions. I'm going to use this maximize field just to show the full size of the window. And I'm going to go into my receivables batches. So the first function that was added here, so let's say I'm going to do a cash receipt batch. So I'm just going to pick, January 2022, and it's a Marvin Burnett batch. So I'm just going to create a batch here. I'm going to say that it's cash receipts. So this is where I'm saying, here's all my deposits for today. So in the past, what I could do is I could take this, populate it with a whole bunch of transactions, so a whole bunch of my cash receipts, apply them. Then what would happen is when I posted them, it would flow through to my bank rec. So on my bank rec side, I would then have to do a second step. So under transactions, financial, and if I go to bank deposits, I would have to go pick up my checkbook and say, all right, well, these were the 10 deposits that I just did in the batch for cash receipts. I now need to pick those up. I could have hit mark all if everything's up to date and hit post, and that would move it into my bank rec window. So here, if I went back into the financial, so transactions, financial, under my bank rec window or my reconciled bank statement, that would show up as a single deposit in my bank rec. Not difficult, but a lot of steps in there. So what they've done here, excuse me, is they've gone through into the receivables batch. I now have the ability to say, how am I going to post my deposit? Post my deposit in summary. So what that's going to do is, it's going to say, take that information, create my posting journal, put it in summary, so that when it's going into my bank deposit window, it's going to show as a summary balance, so that when I'm looking at it on my bank rec, I would see it as one line on my bank rec. So for my deposit today, which is great. Now, to make this work in completion because I had sort of mentioned, you know, the summary, post and summary is the feature that they added. However, a number of years ago, actually it was quite a few years ago, they added a feature that allows you to post bank deposits, so cash receipts straight through to the bank rec. Now, when they added this quite a few years ago, they actually added it only for customers that had analytical accounting installed. There was about a year or two where it was only AA, then all of a sudden they added it to customers that had you know, any of the modules installed. So to be able to do that, I'm just going to go under my Tools, Setup, Company here. So in this setting here, under the options, if you go down to the bottom here and say automatically post cash receipt deposits, what that's going to do in combination with this new feature is going to say, all right, I have a batch of cash receipts that I've created, so I'm going to populate that batch, apply them. My batch is now going to say post and summary. As soon as I post it, it's going to look at this setting and say, oh, don't sit in that bank deposit window, just go straight through the bank rec and show it now as a summary deposit. So when I go straight through, so after I posted that cash receipt batch, so I have that batch, receivables batch right here. When I post that cash receipt batch here in summary, and I hit post here, what ends up happening is, I'll just hit save there, it will bypass or automatically process that bank deposit window, so I no longer have to go into that bank deposit window, and it's going to show up straight into my bank rec. So when I go into Uptown Trust and go to transactions here, it will show up as one of my deposits automatically for the summary amount. So really great feature there, especially for people that are using the cash receipt function and the apply, and then tying it into the bank rec function, or even taking that one step further and going to the electronic bank rec. All really good features there. And that's with tying in the company setup, so we're posting the deposit automatically. Another little feature, I actually should have touched on this when I was talking about it. When I go into segments here, so as I go back in here and I go into my setup and segment, for those of you that are using this window and had to do updates in the past, you've realized, you know what a pain this is if I had to go through, pick up my division, and then if I made a change and called this North America, South America, or whatever it was, it basically, after I hit save, it actually closed the window every time, and I'd have to open it up again and open it up again and just keep doing it for everything that I was updating. They've actually added a wonderful little scroll bar here to scroll through the different fields or attributes for the divisions or whichever segment that you're looking at. So if I look at department, same idea, I can scroll through those different departments that I've got set up. So little things like that. That's one of the votes that went in. I think I saw it under Terry's suggestions, and that was added. Another enhancement that they've added is actually for, I'm going to say for the customers that are using, or for the customers in the US that are using 1099s and 1096s. So I'm going to touch on this. I know a number of the people in the group today are from Canada. However, we do have a couple people from the US. So those people that are using the 1099 function, and I'm just going to go down into my purchasing tab here. One of the things that they've added here is the ability to click on the print 1099. So, well, sorry, I shouldn't say they've added the ability to print 1099. The print 1099 has always been there. But what they've done is they've added the single feed or the continuous feed. So these are just the form types that they've added to this functionality. Now, this is great. I can also say when I go down into my 1096 form, so this is going to be a summary remittance form that you're sending off to the government, it has the email address baked into it as well now. So now you can actually send that information with the email address. Now, where does it find this email address? You'll see that this is my company setup. So in terms of my company setup, I can have multiple addresses set up under my company. So address IDs associated to this company inside GP, so Fabricam. If I go back here, and I'm just going to go under Tools, Setup, Company, and Company, I'm just going to click on the little globe or the internet information. So this is the table that's holding the basically the email and the internet information. So as I scroll through here, you'll see each one of the address IDs that are associated to Fabricam. So how did it get warehouse at fabricam.com? Well, I had an address ID set up there. So when I go back into my 1099 print, you'll see primary has one address. This is warehouse@fabricam.com. So easily enough if I'm doing my 1099 or my 1096. So this actually reminds me of something else that I've seen over the years. So for the companies in the US, you get what the 1099 is. For companies in Canada, this would align similar for a T4A. So you have subcontractors coming in doing work for you, and you have to issue a T4A. Well, maybe you're running them through payables all the time. But at the end of the year, somebody's going through maybe a smart list, great tool, and pulling out, well, I remember because I've got maybe a vendor class or something like that I've identified from my 1099 vendors or some, I've seen a lot of different ways people have tracked, or not 1099 vendors, but my T4A vendors. I've seen a lot of different ways that people have tracked vendors for that functionality. Easily enough, though, if you're in Canada and you want to leverage, I need a listing of all my T4As or something along those lines, I have the ability to go down here and under my options, I can actually identify if they're going to be a 1099 and what type they are. What this will then do is allow me to tag all the transactions. So as I'm doing a payable for that person, I can say, here's the amounts that we've paid them over the year. As well, I can pull reports. So I can leverage my 1099 reports for my T4A functionality. So a nice little cheat there that I've seen a lot of people do on the Canadian side. So two really good functions for, well, even though it's 1099, which would be for, primarily, or I guess the function would be designed for people filing 1099s in the US, but can be used for those T4A functionalities inside Canada. Now, if you're using Canadian payroll, which is part of the base function, it does have a T4A function in there. So don't want to necessarily say you have to do it that way, but Canadian payroll would be a different option to that. Now, one of the next features that they've added in, and I really love this feature because I remember, oh my gosh, it was back in like 2010 or something like that. We had a client that wanted to change the sort option or change the view or the default view when you were going into your inquiries. So for example, if I just go into my receivables inquiry, so I'm just going to jump over to my sales here, and I'm just going to minimize that transactions. Maybe I'm going to bring into focus my inquiry, transactions by customer. What you're going to see here is two different pieces. I have the ability to say, well, let me just jump over to Aaron Fitz. So Aaron Fitz is my favorite customer. But when I'm looking at this information, you can see my documents by document date, by document number. So my documents where I want to search from, as well where I want to sort from. Well, when you go into this window for the first time, you'll see that it is actually defaulting to type, which is fine, but you'll see all these invoices, payments, and you're often scrolling through. And most of the time what people say, you know what, I want to sort by document date. Well, you could easily just go in and click document date. So that one of the new features is giving you that sort by. You also have the ability to change from ascending or descending. You can also say that I want to see my work opener history. So work would be things that I haven't posted yet. Open would be items that have been in receivables posted but not paid yet, or paid transaction removal done. And history would be every transaction that I would be able to see. So in this function that they've added, so this sort by and the changes were added a couple versions ago, but one of the things that you can do is you can easily just save that sort option now. So under your view, just go save window preferences. So simply enough, clicking on those save window preferences now means that when I go back into this window, so if I just go back here and just go transactions by customer, you will see my document date is now going to be my default sort option. A couple things to note here. This save preferences is going to be user specific and company specific. So if I have 2 or 3 companies set up and I like this view, I'd go update it in each company. If one user likes to see it a certain way and a different user likes to see it a different way, once again, that's going to be based, or the save option is going to be based on that user. There is some table information. I'm not going to dive into it, but you can do updates on, I think it's table 1407, where you can say, you know, update this table, set these to the options, just to update a whole bunch of people all at once rather than each person doing it manually. But the option is there that each person can do their own updates. Another feature that was added in the distribution area was in the project accounting functionality. So I know we have a number of clients that use project accounting. Over the years, Microsoft has added different tool sets. So tools for professional service tools, to rename customers, to rename vendors, to merge customers, vendors, addresses, sites, inventory warehouses, so on and so forth. One of the things that they've done now is that they've actually given you the ability to update projects and contract numbers. So if I just go down into my project module, and if I look in my utilities, so under my utilities section, you'll see a project code modifier. So very similar to that, updating the codes for customers and vendors. What you have the ability to do is choose whether it's code, contact, project number, so these different categories. You can just pick up the old code, put in what you want the new code to be, and click on update. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm going to recommend a couple different things. Make sure you have a backup. Make sure you do it at a time when I'm going to say people aren't working it, because if you make a mistake, well, there's no undo button. So you'll want to make sure that you have a good backup in place before you do a utility such as this. But it's a great little feature to say, you know what, we used to name them this way, we want to change them to name them a different way. Great little utility to actually do these updates for you. And then simply enough, once you hit update there, it's just going to go through a routine and update all the table information that's associated to that record. So the next feature that I want to talk about is the all-in-one feature. So the all-in-one feature, this was introduced a couple versions ago, and they introduced it, I think, in the inventory first, then they rolled it out to purchasing, then they rolled it out to sales. So this all-in-one feature is now available in a number of the different functions and areas, and they've enhanced it to give you the ability to save. So for example, if I'm clicking on inventory, now if I go to my item card here, you can see here if I pick up the 450 processor, all right? This is one of the items that I often use for demos and just test with. I can click on my all-in-one view. Now my all-in-one view is going to tell me everything about this item. So here's all the in quantities. So I have some returns, bringing the inventory back in. I have quantity moved, I have quantity out, right? So just the ins and outs. This all-in-one view exists inside the sales, receivables, payables, so different functional areas. If I wanted to, I can change and just go 400 processor, quickly change the view of what I'm looking at. Now this is great. I can just pick up and look at different things. If I also wanted, I can go in here and go quantity in, and I can say, all right, I want to apply a filter. So this is where maybe the site ID is equal to north. So everything, now I can just click on options here because I do have more than one filter available to me, but I can just click on OK here. And what you've seen is now this has gone through and added a filter down to just my 400 processor. Fantastic. Now, if I click on OK here, I'm back to that original screen where I was doing the inquiry on the 450 processor. I'm going to go back into my all-in-one view here. So on my 450 processor, I don't have any custom or tailored filters to this, but on my 400 processor, I actually now have that tailored filter down to an item. So when I'm looking at this, I'm not applying it as a general overall. I'm actually getting that that customization or that ability to apply it right down to a specific item. So great little feature on that side. Now, if I needed to remove the filter, not a big deal. Just click on the little X there, removes the filter. So a really nice enhancement. And as I mentioned, you'll see this functionality. Like I really love this functionality. If I go into sales, for example, and I'm going to go down into my customer, you'll see the all-in-one is going to show up there. So if I go back to Aaron Fitz here and grab Aaron Fitz as the customer, I can go take a look here. If I wanted to, I can click on any of these documents. So you'll see where it's been, where it's going. Well, these are a bad example because there's no additional trace, but this order number 2290, if there was any invoices, by clicking on it, it would actually show me any invoices or returns or cash receipts or quotes that it originated from. So it shows me that whole story, that all-in-one view about what you're looking at. And from here, I can also drill back on it and to get down to the transaction level. So the next thing that I want to touch on in line with the sales, so I'm in the sales window right now, so I might just jump over to the go-tos. So a lot of people use that sales document. So the inquiry sales document feature. So from this, I can start searching on information. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to do a search on that customer ID again. I'm going to pick up Aaron Fitz. Right, favorite customer, I'm just going to hit redisplay here. Here's every unposted document for Aaron Fitz. Now, this has been around for a while. I can highlight any of these. I can drill back on the document number. I can also click on the all-in-one view. So once again, all-in-one's been added to a lot of different areas. So you'll see order number 2233, very interesting. Something is being invoiced against this, so I could actually get all that information. So a nice little inquiry window there. But in the past, you always had just the go-to ability to go to the sales transaction inquiry window. Well, I'm in an unposted document. Why can I not go to the sales transaction? Because I want to add stuff to the sales order. Well, what they've done is they've added the sales transaction entry window. So from here, you can see I've modified my window a little bit just to make things a little nicer. One of the things this has been a little bit of beef of mine over the years, is that, the standard out-of-the-box sales transaction window always had the description in behind. Well, I actually used one of the tools, so a tool anybody's able to use, Modifier, and I was able to take that description. I made the window a little wider, and I just dragged the description up. So presentation on screen looks a little wider, but now my description's up on the screen. So the enhancement is the go-to, and go to the sales transaction entry window, because I can add different functionality. But other enhancements are, the modifier, so making the window look different. Before I close off the screen, I actually want to touch on something else. So one of the things I've had a question on over the years is I'm working with a customer, I got a sales order up, I need to take a look at what they've bought in the past. I need to be able to pull up the information, I need to pull up the items, I need to pull up some history. There is actually a function in GP called customer item history. A lot of people don't realize this, so I figure this is probably a good point to touch on it. I can actually highlight either any of these rows, or I can highlight an open row. If I highlight a row, and I just go under my additional, and if I go historical lookup, what this is going to do is say for Aaron Fitz, and it's going to bring up to the top, what is the information on the sales order process? So the last time I actually had an invoice on May 1st for 2 line items. So for 2 of these for no price. Now, if I go to a blank row and I go down to additional again, what ends up happening is rather than going to the 400 processor, it just goes up to the alphanumeric list and pulls these up. Well, if I'm talking to the customer at this point in time, and they're like, yeah, you know what, you guys sold me a little while ago a attractive phone. I need to get another one of these. So I've gone and taken a look here. I can show the details. So attractive cordless phone here. I can highlight this. If I needed to, I can just highlight the row and hit select. So what that's done is it's actually taken that line item, added it to my sales order, and just populated it with the last price. So this is a great little feature that, over the years, people have asked about this, and it's like, well, did you know this existed? And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. So I figured while we're in the sales inquiry window, drilling back on the sales transaction, probably worthwhile touching on. Now, to make this feature work, not difficult. There's going to be 2 things that you want to do. I'm just going to hit save here. He's over his credit limit, but most of my customers are in this test company. So if you're in here, first thing, I'm just going to go to home. I have a shortcut to my professional service tools library. I'm going to touch on this near the end a little bit more because I really love this feature. But inside here, what you want to do is you want to say customer item lookup. When you click on this, add this, and just simply close here, it's going to enable that feature. So the historical lookup will show up on that window after you enable that feature. The second thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to populate the information. So if I go to Tools, Setup, Sales, and Sales Order Processing, there is the option under Additional here to create initial lookup data. What that's going to do is it's going to create a table in the background that says go populate this for customers that have had orders in the past. Going forward, you don't need to do this because it's just going to continue to add to that table. But for the first time that you're doing it, just create this initial lookup window. And then as soon as you do that, once again, if I just go back to my sales order, so transaction sales, sales transaction entry, If I go back into, I don't remember which order that was, but let's just assume it was this order. So alt manufacturing, if I go back here, additional historical lookup, well, I've never really bought anything other than this one order for alt manufacturing, so nothing's there. But what it would do is it would show you historical information for alt and manufacturing. So there's an old update that was done, plus one of the new features, combine them together, you really get some really strong functionality out of GP on that one. So next area that I want to touch on is the human resources and payroll. So there's been a couple features that have been added in this area. I also want to take a little moment. I sort of joked earlier that, you know, if Scott gives me a soapbox to stand on, I'm going to certainly stand on it and make note of certain things. In this release, all the payroll updates that have been done have been updates to the US payroll. So for those customers on the line that are using US payroll, you guys got some updates. For those of you that are using Canadian payroll, they didn't do any updates on this. But what I would like to point out is we have that voting functionality. They've added some of the features, and I'm going to touch on them in a minute. Go back into here, add some of these, like you guys added Canadian or US payroll, a copy and paste function from Excel. Please add this to the Canadian payroll. I know you guys can do it because you've already approved it. So it's sort of giving you that ability to stand up and have a voice to say, Microsoft, please add these updates. But to go back to here, a couple of things I want to touch on. So I can go through the features here and go under HR and payroll, and I can just go through there, or I can go cards, payroll, employee to get to the employee card. Or one of the things that I've also done is I've gone through and I've added some shortcuts. So I love using shortcuts on my left-hand side. So I've actually created a little subfolder. One of the enhancements that came out was on the employee maintenance. So on the employee maintenance, when I'm producing a safe pay file. So a safe pay file is basically a file that you can send off to the bank to say, these are payments that I issued to, in this case, employees. It is going to take the check name. So if the check name's been updated to say that the employee is this, but the check name's this, it will actually update the check name on the safe pay file. So if I was paying Sarah Perry, but it was a different name that was being paid under, the safe pay file would actually be updated to have that name on it. So that was one of the discrepancies that they had found that they've updated to say, you know what, this gives you an update on your safe pay file. The next thing that we have is updates on the W-2s. So inside the W-2, in the past, when you were generating the W-2 forms, so I'm just going to go into my print W-2. I'm going to click on this. One of the things that it would do is on the printout of that tax form, it would actually show the entire social security number. I can actually now mask out the social security number. So what this will do is it'll throw X's over those first 5 digits of the 9-digit social security number. So a nice little feature on that. So it's hiding that social security number and that, you know, that sensitive information that you don't want to have presenting out to, well, presented on a form. Now, the last feature that I just want to touch on the payroll side is this copy and paste function. Now, there's one thing to realize that I have the ability to copy and paste from Excel. However, it only works if I'm not using analytical accounting. So in Fabricam, which is the test company I'm in right now, I actually have analytical accounting installed. So I'm just going to jump into my holding company. So I have a separate little holdco here set off on the side. And I'm just going to be able to demonstrate the fact that you can see that. There's certain things I don't have registered, so I'll get a couple little messages here. I'm not going to worry too much about those. But I'm going to use that shortcut. So when I create a shortcut on the left-hand side, you'll see that it carries forward because I'm still logged in as the same user. So as I move into employee maintenance, or sorry, not employee maintenance, but as I move into payroll transaction entry here, and let's say I'm creating a new batch, the week 41, I'll just say add that batch and save. You'll see that as I tab past this, I now have a paste function. So all you really have to do is you just have to have the information in the same sequence, so the employee number, the transaction type, the code, the department, and the amount on a Excel file, and I would be easily able to copy and then just hit paste here. I don't have to do single rows, I can do multiple rows. So I know this is, to me, this is huge. And I wish it was in Canadian payroll as well, because being able to just take that information from Excel, copy and paste it would be wonderful. It's in US payroll, so I know it can be done. So what I recommend is people, you know, if you don't, you know, I will make sure that Scott gets this link out after the webinar so people have the ability to go out and set some votes. So to get that Canadian payroll feature added into that they added for the US payroll. Just going to jump back into Fabricam here for a little bit more. Let's give that a second to pull up. Now, I'm going to move into some of the, I'll say some of the bigger areas that Microsoft's added a lot of workflow over the last couple of versions, and that's, or a lot of functionality in the last couple of versions, that's in the workflow area. So the workflow area is basically your ability to say, I want to create a process that says if I'm going to enter a batch of payables, I need to, submit it to Scott. So if I'm keying the payables in, I'm going to submit it to Scott. Scott's going to review it, approve it. In the past, well, actually, let me just open up the workflow window so you can see what the flow is. So under my administration tab, I'm just going to minimize system here, and I'm just going to open up my workflow here. Under my workflow maintenance, so the workflow maintenance is where you have the ability to create new workflows. So you'll see here, there's financial, sales, purchasing, payroll, project, and administration. On the financial, sales, and purchasing, you have the ability to actually create batches. So I have a payables batch, and inside that batch, I can tie in a workflow. So if I take a look here, let's say I've done a batch. Well, I've got a test one here that's going to say, check batch. So my workflow here is saying, you know what, I have a test batch or a workflow called test. I probably should have called it computer checks, but I have some criteria in here. So it's saying anytime a batch has an origin of 2, which happens to be computer checks, then I need it to fire off through the workflow. And for the approval process, I have it assigned to a couple different people. You'll see here I have it assigned to Donnie Wahlberg, Jonathan Knight, and Jordan Knight. For any of you recognizing those names, yes, I believe they might be new kids on the block, but we won't go there. I also have that there's a time limit of 2 days for them to approve it. So what's going to happen is anytime I create a payables batch, and you'll see that this one is active, it's going to go through and generate a workflow that says, all right, you three, somebody's got to approve this. And based on this, I know that only one person needs to approve it. I could have one person or multiple people in this approver list, and they'll get reminders every 4 hours if nobody hasn't approved it. As well, it's going to send an email off, so workflow assignment, and if there's any documents attached to that batch, they would be pushed through, and any Word templates that would be pushed through with that workflow as well. Those are existing functionalities. In the past, I would enter my batch, I would enter my payables, key in my batch, save it, I would hit submit. It would fire off to one of these people, they would review it, they would approve, and then it's going to send back a notification through email to Marvin to say your batch has been approved, and then I can actually go back in and post the batch. So that's how it worked in the past. But now what I have the ability to do is I can actually say automatically post when workflows complete. So same functionality as it had before, but this piece is huge because now once it's complete, I don't have to wait for somebody else to post it. I don't have to send back the notification. As soon as it is completed, it just posts automatically. So just as a side note, so this is an active workflow. I'm just going to go into my purchasing batch. So I have a couple payables that have been set up already. So I've got a couple batches here. So you'll see a payables batch. I'd actually submitted this just to test it, just so you can see view history. You'll see that it was entered and recalled. Okay, so in this is a payables batch. It's not a computer check batch, or this would have said computer check. So you'll see here under this computer checks, and this is going to fire through and say, well, this needs approval if I have this batch. But I'm just going to go through here and say, all right, here's my test batch. It's got 1 or 2 transactions in it. Simply enough, when I enter this, it's going to, as soon as I hit submit, it's going to take a look at that workflow, determine what needs to be done. And in this case, because it's a payables batch and not a check batch, it's going to just automatically approve. In the past, it would have sent Marvin a notification to say this is automatically approved. I can just hit submit here. I don't need to do that because what you just saw is it actually just automatically posted. So the batch has posted itself. I've turned off the posting journal so I don't have to print them each time because they're all reprintable. But now if I go back and take a look here, that payables MV batch is gone because it took a look at the workflow, didn't require any approval, so it posted automatically. If it did require approval, it would actually send it off to the approver, so Jordan Knight in this case, and when he reviewed it and said, yep, Marv, everything looks good, and said it's approved, so through his email, he can say it's approved, it would actually come back and automatically post that batch for me. It would send me a notification that it's been approved, but I wouldn't have to do any further action. Now, if there was an issue, like let's say I tried to do it for a date that was in the past and GP doesn't allow you to post in that historical date because you've closed the period, it would actually, in the history, give you a notification that says this batch failed because, and then the reasons for the failure: batch not able to post, closed period, or whatever the reason was. So it is still going to do all the validation that GP would have in place to check for, valid posting, valid periods, stuff like that. But that's what it's going to do in regards to allow you to post or automatically post on the workflow. So just to go back here again, I'm just going to go back into my workflow. So under company here, under workflow maintenance. So you'll see here when I go back to that test batch here, I've got automatically approve. I can use mark off if I want to approve delegates, approve originators, so on and so forth. I can also go back into here. So I'm just going to take a look at a few more of the features when I go back into my check batch here. You can see I had Jordan Knight, Jonathan Knight, and Donnie Wahlberg as approvers, right? So in this case, my completion policy was set to only one person needs to respond. Well, one of the features that they've added is you can actually specify how many of the approvers have to respond now. So if all three of them have to, or if two of them have to, I can specify that. And what that's going to mean is this batch does not get approved and posted until all three of them come back with a response, because I've just updated this to all three. So that's a great little feature as well. Now, in this, that's great. I've got Jordan, Jonathan, all these other people that need to be approvers. But I may also want to have multiple people getting it. So carbon copies, or a carbon copy on the email. I can set that up as well. So I'm just going to go back to my home tab here, and I'm just going to go into my workflow email notification. And you can see here on my email notification, depending on what I'm doing, if every time a workflow is submitted, it's going to use a certain message. I can specify this message down to the type of workflow. So if it was a payables versus receivables, I can update that. But I can also say every time this is being sent out, Jordan Knight needs to be added as a CC or a carbon copy on this. So it's actually going to CC Jordan Knight every time I send out or I submit a workflow. He's not going to necessarily be one of the approvers, but he has visibility that it was done. So the add for the carbon copy has been added, and the ability to take away. So it gives you the ability to look up, choose multiples, or take away those people. So that's one of the other enhancements that they've added around the workflow. So we talked about the number of approvers, we talked about that. So those are, with respect for time, those are some of the key highlights that I want to touch on in regards to functionality that's been added into this version. So the next piece I want to touch on, so I'm just going to go back to that PowerPoint for a second. And if I go, slide from current, oh well, whatever. If I just go back into this and go here, there's a couple other functions. So as I was going through this, I talked about some of the features and tied the features in together with ones that already exist. Over the years, there's lots of features that I've seen that, either people don't even realize they have or aren't using as much as they could be, or, maybe you are, and I've actually learned because I've watched other people use it and they've shown me a lot of great tricks and features. So some of the things that I want to touch on. So inside Smart List, there's the ability to build Smart List, export Smart Lists, update some of our defaults, and even increase our performance. So one of the great features that I love about GP is Smart Lists. So inside Smart Lists, so I'm just going to minimize that. You have, hopefully everybody here knows that you can use Smart Lists, and everybody on the call knows what Smart List is. If you don't, please contact me, because oh my gosh, it's so wonderful. So inside here, you have the ability to create your own Smart List, right? So under account transactions, I can go here, grab a listing of my account transactions. One of the things I can do is I can say, all right, great. I use this all the time. I'm going to save it. So, save it as one of my favorites. Okay, so I'm going to add that list. So one of the things that one of the enhancements over the past have done is giving you the ability to get a little more space, so it minimizes the list, and you can add the enhancements to the list. If I wanted to, I can click on one of these. And if I go back up to the header, sorry, if I just go back up to the folder here, I can actually give myself the ability to click on new and create custom ones. So that's where I want to take one of the existing ones and modify it, or I can just create a custom one and I want to join different things together. So that's Smart List Designer. So great little feature there. Another feature that people don't realize is you have, the ability to, well, hopefully everybody realizes you have the ability to spit these transactions out to Excel. So if I go down to my Smart List transaction here, and I'm just going to go Marvin's demo, I've set this one up. If I click on Excel here, I'm just going to go quick export. So what that's going to do is it's going to spit the data out to Excel for me. So there's my raw data. Now, if I always spend my time and I go insert pivot table, and I want to do a pivot table that, takes this area and drag and drop, maybe the customer name, date, and whatever date, come on, Marvin, and document number or document amount. Maybe this is something I do all the time because I want to create a pivot table every time I spit this data out. I'm using sales as an example. I've seen lots of people do payroll. I've seen lots of people do payables, stuff like that. If you repeat these steps over and over again, I always recommend build yourself a little macro. Just look up on Excel or on Google how to build a macro in Excel. And then what you can do is you can take that macro and you can build out a Smart List export solution. So an export solution is basically where you're taking that macro. So I'm going to go find that macro. So it's located on a file location on my share drive here, and say every time I do a certain smart list, so I'm just going to go down into here, and I'm going to find my sales smart list. I'm going to go down to sales transactions. You'll see I've tagged it to Marvin's demo because I've got a specific smart list that says run this macro. So I built it the first time and then I applied it to the smart list. What ends up happening here then is when I go back into that sales transaction, right, and I go back to Marvin's demo, based on the criteria, the search criteria will refresh every single time. So every time I open it, it'll give me the newest data. But when I click on Excel now, if I click on sample, probably should have called it a sales transaction export instead of sample. But when I click on this, it's going to actually run that exact same process. So you'll see it spit out to Excel. But those macro steps that I had run in the background then get applied. And now it's actually taken, pivot tabled, and now I've got my report. So great little feature, very underutilized in the GP world, but I love it because everyone I know uses Smart List. Everyone builds reports. So you call it an ad hoc reporting tool, but you always are constantly building reports on it. So great little feature on that side. Another thing that I've often seen is people always go, you know what, Marvin, when you grab that field or that transaction, right, for my GL accounts, it always stops at 1,000. Why does it stop at 1,000? I want to increase it. Well, you can always save it. You can always increase the search criteria on a save smart list to greater than 1,000. But if you always want Smart List to pull up more than 1,000 records, if I go down into my administration and my settings here, you'll see I have Smart List options. Well, what do I want to do in these Smart List options? Well, you'll see here's a Smart List for accounts, here's a Smart List for vendors, customers, blah, 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 so on and so forth. As I'm looking through each one of these, so I think transactions or whatever was one of them, wherever it was, I'll just stick to accounts. I have the ability to actually say maximum number of records is going to be, well, let me just go 99999. Great, and simply hit OK. I can also move around the columns. So if I wanted account description before account number, I can set that as my default. So now I have a little bit more flexibility around how I want to tailor that smart list. So when I go back into smart lists, if I simply click on that accounts again and click on the star, you'll see account description the first thing, and it's searching the first 999 number of records. So that is a great little feature that you can now start tailoring your smart list to the way you need them. I'll just hit stop here and close out of there. Another thing that I really love about GP is the ability to use the data. So data connections, grabbing the data, using the data, modifying existing data, so on and so forth. So there's a couple different ways. I touched on Smart List. There, I think at last count, there was like 22 or 2,300 different reports inside GP, but there are so many other tools that you can use. I've often touched on SQL Reporting Services. So SQL Reporting Services is one of those tools that you can say, go grab my data. You own it, might as well use it. So under here, you'll see I can go and I have 4 different companies set up, 2 not-for-profit, holdco. You saw me jumping into those. I'm going to jump into 2. So if I wanted that same trial balance out of the GL or a sales report or something along those lines, I can always click on one of those. You'll see here I have like a trial balance summary. If I wanted to, I click on this, grab my trial balance summary. I also have the ability to say, you know what, if I have maybe that next level of skill to work with data, I can modify reports or I can build tailored reports. So for example here, I can use SQL Reporting Services because this question came up a little while ago. One of the people I was working with was saying, I need a continuity schedule in fixed assets. So you guys own fixed assets. You can get a continuity schedule out of GP. However, you got to pull a couple different reports to get it. He's like, yeah, I know you can pull this report for the starting balance is this, and these 2 or 3 reports, dump them into Excel, key a bunch of stuff. He goes, I don't want to do that. I'd like one report that brings it all together. Well, we sort of took a look at where the data was lying inside fixed assets, and we just built out a report that basically takes that data from the 2 or 3 different data sources and 101, 2027. Oh, that's not a real date. I gotta actually put the dates in, and my test date is up in 2027. So that's why I keep using that. And easily enough, I can actually just take that data that we had, and now I've got a continuity schedule that he liked. So use the data, use the tools is what I'm saying here to actually build out reports. So there's a couple different areas on those reports side. So one of the areas is SQL Reporting Services, and another area is the Excel reports. So Excel reports, so before I jump in those, I will just go under Tools, Setup, System, and Reporting Tools Setup. You'll actually see here, I have the ability to Reporting Service, Excel reports, point to where they are, and deploy my reports. I've already deployed them, so I'm not going to do it a second time. But when I do that, you'll see when I jump back into here, I just created a shortcut to where I've deployed those 2. It creates folders for each one of the functional areas that I have. And you'll see when I jump into this, a lot of the default smart lists that I'm using actually become Excel reports. So if I want my account summary, I can just double click on that. It returns my GL account summary. As I'm going through this, you'll see that they've done a couple different areas. So I go into purchasing, for example. So if I go into purchasing, I can say, all right, well, here's my purchase requisition line, so on and so forth. They even have some dashboards in there. So where that's doing is it's actually taking multiple data sets and pulling them together. I didn't create this. This is one of them that came out of the box with the system. So you can actually get this information. You can see that it's just a series of exports with data connections on it, pulling together on a dashboard. So a great little function, a great little feature inside GP. I actually wouldn't even say it's a little feature. It's a very large feature because you can leverage the data. I don't have to use Smart List to generate the Smart List to export it out. I can use an Excel report to pull it out. You'll see it's tied into the different functional areas. Even manufacturing is included there. So if I was looking at work in process, I can see all the recorded, well, bad example, there's nothing in that one. But if I wanted to see suggested outsourcing POs, here's the ones that they're suggesting for outsource. So nice and easy, I can get to that data. Now, for the more technical user, you do have the ability to either leverage the existing data connections, you can tailor them a little bit to yourself, or you can even build custom ones. So you can make calls out to the server. So this is going to be a little bit more on the technical side, but you can see here, I've got a custom one under my GP share Excel reports. I've got a custom one here for a BOM costing report. So somebody asked, can I get a BOM costing report? And easily enough, I can say, all right, well, this is going in, grabbing data. So there's actually some data connections in the background. So when I go back into my queries and connections, it'll show what my connections are. And there's a query to my server. And then when I just hit refresh all, in this case, if I wanted to, 100 XLG, I can actually have it prompt to say, all right, well, what do you want to do? Well, it's gone through, well, I had the 100 XLG up on that one, so it's gone through and got that information. If I wanted, I can also say cards, manufacturing, bill of material. Same idea here. Let me grab not the 100 XLG, but this really nice bike from 3T. And when I go back into this and I go data refresh, I'm just going to go OK there. And if all goes well, there's my build for my Exploro 54 Max bike. So those are a couple of the other features that I really love, like leverage that information. You've spent a lot of time building up this database of information, be able to pull it out, right? So those are some of the data connections. Word templates, professional service tools, and workflow, two things I absolutely love. Word templates I also love as well. If I'm going inside GP here, and I take a look at my GP, I'm going to go under my reports, template maintenance, right? So under my template maintenance, you can see here, I've got a couple different reports that I've modified. Maybe this stop blank invoice. I can tie this to a specific company. So this one is going to be presented to these companies. If I want to change the logo or do something along those lines, where templates are actually quite easy to work with. I can take this base one and I can hit modify here. So as I modify this, it's going to say, well, here's your base report. Maybe I have embedded logos that are coming in. Maybe I want to add a custom logo, so rather than have it embedded from GP to pull it out, maybe I want to have a custom logo embedded to there. So I'm just going to go into my header here and I can just pick that. I'm just going to delete that field from this report. And simply enough, if I go back into my images, so I'm just going to go back into my GP share because I've got a couple images shared. And maybe I want to pick up this image. So I'm just going to copy that because maybe that's my company logo. And let me just paste that. I'm just going to rescale it to size because Homer Simpson deserves respect of having the right size. And file, save as, and maybe this is my holdco. So I'm just going to say holdco and save. So easily enough, I've saved that. From here, I can go through and I can import it. So I just simply click on that, import it. So, well, this is the number 2. So if I have the holdco one, I can just import it. And then from here, it would show up in this list. And all I have to do is assign it to, well, whether the company. So if I say I want this to be for my holdco company and then set as default, I can do that. Oh, sorry, let me pick it as default, apply, and then just hit save. So now my holdco company has it has the same presentation but different logo on it. So very easy to update and modify. That's why I really love word templates. You can even get down to the tailoring them right down to the customer because I could have specified on these and assigned it to a customer. So if you think about having order confirmations, maybe some customers want order confirmations that have prices on them, some don't. Well, you could just hide that price field on your sales order doc and have the name order confirmation at the top. And when you're sending off your order confirmation to the customer, you can say these customers like confirmation with price, these ones like it without price. So those are a couple of the different features that I really like. I talked about the professional service tools, so talked about the project one, but even under professional service tools here, you'll see there's a whole host of different things that you can turn on. You can modify GL accounts, combine them, checkbooks. So if you're changing a checkbook from Canadian to whatever, BMO to RBC, not sure you'd rename it that way, but you could rename them. You can merge inventory. So if you had truck stock, so you had a fleet of vehicles that had stock in it, and you got rid of one of the trucks and you moved all the stock into another one, you could easily actually just merge 2 warehouses together. So lots of great features on that side. So those are some of the things that over the years that I've seen that people, don't either use enough or I think they're really wonderful. And then just as a little bit of a final part here, I'm sure Scott's probably sweating because I'm coming right to the end. Oh, I might have even gone over a little bit, so hopefully people are still with us. A couple of the other ones that I really like, over the years, and since COVID has kicked in, I will say a lot of companies have had people move to remote work. So from a remote work standpoint, one of the things that I've seen that is really great is AP automation. So how do I leverage how do I leverage my system more? Well, you can use the workflow that's built inside GP. So you can use the doc attach feature. You can submit for approvals, stuff like that. You can set up EFT. So now you're doing electronic payments for vendors. But I do know that if that isn't quite enough and you want to move to the next level, so you want some object character recognition or OCR, so that scanning function, or have a requisition management, or even some places like Staples has that punch out function. So you create your order, hit the punch out, and you have it pass through automatically. You know, companies like Quick Tags, Dynamic Point, Fraction, MetaViewer, those are all companies that are in that ISV, so that add-on space, that do it extremely well. So they can help manage workflow, they can have virtual file cabinets, things like that. So this is kind of the scenario if workflow and GP isn't quite enough for you, and you need to move to that next level, one of these guys would help. Other things like Rockton SmartFill just makes navigating working in GP a lot easier. And Binary Stream, these guys have a couple great products. I know in the last couple of years, we've had a number of our customers that have been in a very fortunate position where they've been able to acquire other companies. Rather than go through the whole process of setting up new databases and new catalogs and everything, they've actually implemented multi-entity. So multi-entity allows you to layer companies inside a single database so that you can share customers, share vendors, share inventory items, while at the same time segregating them so each company has their own visibility to it. They also have subscription billing, so a lot of great features like that. So thank you very much, Scott. Maybe I'll bring you back on the call because you're probably sweating a little bit because, you know, if you let me talk, I'll talk forever.
This was all entertaining and very educational, so thank you, Marvin. And along that subscription billing, that is for helping clients manage the subscriptions that they're selling out to their customers. So you got the revenue deferrals and the expense deferrals and all those components. So
absolutely.
That's some cool stuff. Can you get back to PowerPoint and we'll just close it off?
Oh, yeah, sure thing. And for anyone that's painfully watching me go right back to the beginning of the PowerPoint going, no, click on the start from current slide. I apologize.
No worries. So thank you, Marvin, and thank you everyone for listening and attending today. We also have opportunity to ask some questions through the GoToWebinar questions section and chat. On to the next slide, and I'll close this up, Marvin. For those that are new to Endeavour and GP Support North, we've been around for over 30 years. I think we're now into 33. Advisory, implementation, and ongoing support. We have a very strong Dynamics GP practice. We also have a Dynamics Nav and Business Central practice for those that are looking to switch platforms. Complementing those with the cloud for Azure, Microsoft 365, Office 365, Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, and all the Power tools up in the cloud. And that's in a way to expand and complement your on-premise GP with additional cloud-based applications. Next slide. And this is really just coming down to what's next. Find us online, www.GP Support North, www.endeavorsolutions.ca, or Google us. Reach out to Trish, James, or Steve to talk further, and obviously any consultants or the Endeavour and GP Support North help support desk. We're all here to help you and help you make your businesses better, leveraging technology and skills that are available.
Scott, you know what, I'm going to, just because I love to talk, and most people know that, I'm going to actually make up a question for myself. This way, hopefully I answer it correctly as well.
Sure. Be kind.
One of the things that I have seen over the years, so I'm going to go into workflow. So workflow is that, like, it's huge. Like, they've been adding so much effort and so many additional workflows and so much functionality to it that I don't think people actually realize how powerful it can be. So for example, if I go back into this test workflow here, so I've got this check back. So people are often used, so anybody that's used to working with workflow, they're used to seeing, okay, I can click on this, and this is that criteria field, right? So what is my criteria? If I wanted to say, you know what, the batch ID is this, or the comment, or the frequency, or the origin, I've got like 4 or well, 10 or 11 fields here. People are like, that doesn't seem quite like enough. I'd like to have way more fields available to me. Well, you're right, and you should have way more fields available to you. I'm just going to, I'll hit save here for a second. I'm just going to close out of GP. So over the years, there is, when you log into GP, there's a file in the background called the Dex.ini, so the dexterity initialization file. You can actually add snippets of code to that Dex.ini file. So I'm just going to actually add something. So I've cheated here, and I have copied this. So just on the off chance nobody asks questions, I can take this QueryDesignerAllFunctionality equals true. I'm going to go right click, and I'm just going to go find where my GP is installed. So if this is on a local workstation, I'm going to want to update that Dex.ini file, which is located in my data folder. And there it is right there. And I'm just going to add this to the bottom of the file, right? So query designer equals true. Now I exited out of GP, so I do know that for this new functionality to be initialized, I have to exit out, go back in, because I've made an update to the Dex.ini file. It reads that file every time it goes in to say, what do you want? Like, do you want some stuff tailored? Like, you can change the window size, you can change font, you can even do a smart list export enhancement equals true, and it speeds up the smart list as they export out to Excel by about 10-fold. But let me just log in here.
Marvin, just for a sec,
yeah.
one of the questions was, how do I check what version of GP I have? I saw it in the bottom left there. Is there also an easier way?
So you can always check the version when you're logging into GP, because it'll show up in the bottom left here. So let me just click on this as well. So in the bottom left, as this window pops open, here's one piece of version information, or one spot. Or if you're in GP right now, so I'm just going to go into GP, you will see the lovely little help button up in the top right corner. So as I go into the help button in the top right corner and I go about Dynamics GP, you will see here's the information, so all the build and the version information. So typically this is the number that you're looking for, so the 18.4, in this case it's the 1361, which tells me I have the payroll updates installed as well, but 18.4 would be my major build.
Thank you very much.
So that would be easily enough how to find it. Now to go back to that update, so I've actually updated that Dex.ini file. I'm going to go back into my company settings under workflow here and workflow maintenance. So a minute ago, you remember how I had maybe, a couple fields available to me. Like I'm going to say 12 fields available to me on this. Now, with that additional code, you're going to see I have every field in every module now available to me. So under the batch header, these are the defaults that they chose, but if I want GL posting date, series, mark to post, all I have to do is add those check marks. And then I can just go under conditions. And now those additional fields, GL post date, last marked post, stuff like that, have now become available inside this workflow. So am I limited to the defaults? No, those are just what people thought you'd want to see. Yeah, so that was a great little feature. And I think it was either Brittany or Tarhili at our office. Like one of the things we do internally is we have these meetings where we talk about new features or things that are really cool that people have seen and found it and shared that. It's like, oh my gosh, it's been so helpful in so many different scenarios.
You guys rock. Okay, one last question. Office 365 and the TLS 1.2. Will it affect version 18.2? The answer is yes.
Unfortunately, when Microsoft does turn off TLS 1.0, it is going to have an effect on version 8.2. So 8.3 and beyond is where they've done all their updates on.
Looking at the time, this was fantastic. If there's any last little questions, fire them off. Otherwise, you can also reply to the webinar invite as well as the Endeavour support desk, and we are here to help you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for attending.